Right guys, we're on to our next Necrons video, and we did a poll of course, and 1,700 of you guys actually voted, and 37% of the vote went for the Monolith. So today we're going to be asking the most important questions to ask yourself when you want to field a Monolith. So let's get into it. In fact, before we do, comment from the previous video was from Khan Total Gaming 99 in relation to the Scorpit Destroyers. This is, I love running 6 Scorpits with a Lord with the Clave Fulcrum enhancement in the Hypercrypt Legion. Gives them deep strike, and all of a sudden they're really scary with rapid ingress now. Very good idea, and I might be trying that one out. I think I quite like that one. Yes, that's from Khan Total Gaming 99. Shout out to you. If you want to get involved in the next video, all you need to do is comment down on this video and I'll randomly select a comment for the next video. Right then, let's get onto this Monolith then. We know the stats are good. We know it's got 22 wounds. It's our big Necrons vehicle. It's got Titanic. It's a bit of an expensive one. It's now 400 points. It was 375, but with the recent points data balance, data slate thingamajig, it did go up 25 points. So yeah, big sad. 400 points now. It is what it is. It's our teleporting vehicle, not so much a transport, but a teleporting vehicle is what I would like to call it. So let's get on to the first question of the day. Again, I've not counted them up. I'll have to do it afterwards. Best way to use the Eternity Gate. Now, if you're not familiar with the Eternity Gate, it is... In fact, this isn't my question. Let me go back a step. Rewind. This is from Active Basking Shark 1018, another 4-digit. If you YOLO deep strike your Monolith into the enemy rear, what's the best unit to have jump out of it? So I'll put the question forward, what's the best way to use the Eternity Gate? So yeah, going back to that Eternity Gate, what is it? In your reinforcement step of your movement phase, you can select a Necron's infantry unit that's either in reserves or on the battlefield. You basically scoop them up, and then you can set them up anywhere wholly within 6 inches of your Monolith, and not within engagement range, and you can't be charging out of it. There is a way to charge out of it. We'll get onto that later on. But going back to the question, what's the best way to use that ability? There's quite a number of infantry units that you could use with the Eternity Gate. Immortals and Warriors are our go-to battle line units. They're shooty, and they've got a lot of object control with 2 per model. So bringing them out into a certain location is good. It's ideal. They don't need to charge. They only need to shoot. So bringing them out, they still get to shoot. You're moving around a lot of OC. That is a strategy. It kind of depends on where the game has gone and if you need a unit in a certain location. But those 2 units could work. Lich Guard, you can move around those 4+ invulnerable saves with the shields. They're not going to be able to charge, but again, you might need some more OC in a certain location. Or just a little bit more resiliency, or maybe even a screen that's a little bit more survivable than like Scarabs or something. It's not really worth it with the Scorpit Destroyers because they can't charge out the gate and they're not as resilient as Lich Guard. Unless you're playing Hypercrypt Legion. Again, we'll talk about that later on. It's also worth noting that Canoptic Wraiths that are being led by a Technomancer can make use of the Eternity Gate because they share the keywords. And if you look at the Eternity Gate ability, it's an infantry unit, not infantry models. So as soon as a Technomancer joins the unit, they all share keywords, they become an infantry unit, as well as a beast unit. So they all share keywords, and as long as they've got the infantry unit keyword, they can use the Eternity Gate. So you could use them if you want. Again, I mean, they've got the speed, the resiliency is there. Maybe it's just something you want to do to affect the game, the balance of the game. But they could probably go to where they want to go to on their own. Now, another question from one of you guys, Donut O. How much is the Monolith needed in the Hypercrypt Legion? Is it healthy for a unit to be connected to one? So I've kind of simplified the question to what's the best detachment. I think that's where this is going. We will talk a bit more about the Hypercrypt in a moment, don't worry, but I think the best detachment is the Hypercrypt Legion. Not only does this thing have deep strike, so you could pick it up and then re-deep strike it again with hyperphasing abilities, but there's also 5 stratagems within this detachment that could relate to the Monolith. The first one, Cosmic Precision, that could relate to anything, but the Monolith is such a big bulky model that sometimes it's quite difficult to find a 9-inch gap for a model this size, whereas with Cosmic Precision, you're only 3 inches away from enemy models, so it's much easier to find that gap. So that's the first one. You've got the hyperphasic recall for units to return to the monolith if they lose a single model. If you lose a single warrior in a unit in the fight phase or the shooting phase, you can use hyperphase recall and bring them back to the monolith so that they're safer or safeguarded. It could apply to Lich Guard, it could apply to Immortals, and so on. It could apply to virtually anything, as long as it's got the infantry keyword, that is. You've got the quantum deflection stratagem, which gives the monolithic 4+ invulnerable save. It's a vehicle, so the 4+ invulnerable save is going to be handy, whether it's a shooting phase or the fight phase, because it's only got a 2+ armor. Now, a 2+ armor is good, don't get me wrong. Even -3 AP weapons will still give it a 5+ armor save, and you're probably going to find cover. So it's very reliant on, or very dependent rather, on the AP of the weapon. If there's a high AP weapon, -4 and onwards, then yeah, you probably do need the invuln save. You've got the entropic damping stratagem, which turns on hazardous if enemy units are shooting against the monolith, and the dimensional corridor stratagem to allow units to charge out. So going back to those Scorpit destroyers potentially. For 2 CP, they can come out the Eternity Gate and charge. So lots of stratagems that relate to the monolith from the Hypercrypt Legion. It's clearly the best detachment, which kind of brings me on to the next question. Is it only usable in the Hypercrypt Legion? I wouldn't say only usable in the Hypercrypt Legion, but you've just got far less synergy if you're not within that detachment. Maybe if you're using the Awakened Dynasty and you're popping out a unit of Immortals, with a Plasmancer could work, and using that Eternity Gate to move OC around again. But I mean, you could just get like a Veil of Darkness relic. That's the old editions. That is enhancement. The Veil of Darkness enhancement could probably just do that, and you don't have to pay 400 points for that. So maybe it is only usable in that detachment. You're very limited if you're not playing the Hypercrypt Legion. And maybe in the Annihilation Legion it has some play, again with the Scorpit Destroyers, but you can't charge out of it, that's the problem. So maybe it is only usable really in the Hypercrypt Legion. We've also got to consider that you're paying 400 points not just for the Eternity Gate, but also for the weapons that the Monolith has. They still hold a lot of value. So that is actually the next question. Do you go with the Death Rays or do you go with the Gauss Flux Arcs? You've got the options of 4 of either. This one's an easy one to answer. You go with the Death Rays all day long. We've got plenty of anti-infantry weapons available with warriors, with immortals, canoptic wraiths in melee. You've got Lich Guard in melee, canoptic spiders. Even the Silent King's got some decent anti-infantry. Tesseract Bolt if you're going bigger. Now, with the Monolith, if you are taking the Gauss Flux Arcs, 24 strength 6 shots is pretty nice, but it's not 400 points nice. It's not 400 points nice. Without anti-tank in the Codex, we've got less options. Yes, we've got the Locust Heavies, we've got Doomsday Arcs, Doom Stalkers, maybe Doom Scythes if you want to go that far, but each one has its own problems within itself. Now with the Death Rays, the damage is pretty decent. You've got the Sustains D3 on top of that. I mean, in one of my last games against Idic Beer, I came against his Monolith and he rolled 4 6s. And then with the D3s, sustained hits, they were all 3s. They're all basically 3 shots per. And he absolutely annihilated a unit of Scorpit Destroyers with the Scorpit Lord. And I had the -1 to hit enhancement on. I was playing the Annihilation Legion. Absolute disgusting is what I would put it as. Absolutely disgusting. So yeah, you would go with the Death Rays all day long. We need the anti-tank. And if you're paying 400 points, you may as well have it. Don't forget, we've also got the Particle Whip, which you will have as standard, which is a pretty decent weapon. 3d6 shots is like averaging 10 or 11 shots. And Blast on top, so you might get some more. Devastating Wounds as well. A great little anti-infantry weapon there. Is the Monolith dangerous in melee? Within engagement range, how good is it? It's fairly good, you know. People underestimate how good the Portal of Exile actually is. 6 attacks that hit on 2s, you're basically going to get 5 hits on average. Strength 8, -2, 3 damage. I mean, that's good. That's good for something that shouldn't really be fighting. None of our Necron vehicles are really that good within engagement range. Even the Triax Stalker is kind of a bit stinky with only 4 attacks. The Monolith, I'd argue, is probably the best in melee, as far as vehicles go. What? So that was an easy answer. How good is it? Is it dangerous? Yeah, it is. I mean, you know what? Let's break into that a little bit more because I didn't give it enough justice there. Strength 8, that wounds most infantry, well, all infantry on at least 3s, possibly 2s. -2 is fine, but the damage 3 is a lot. That's a lot. It starts to add up against even light vehicles, but against infantry, even Terminators without the shields, you're literally taking them up. You're literally taking them out. And you might only kill a couple of them, but this thing isn't meant to be fighting, really, so it's good. I'd say it was good. So why is the Monolith so expensive then? 400 points, what are you getting really? You're getting the Eternity Gate, you get the 4 Death Rays, you get the Portal of Exile, you're getting Towering, because you can be targeted if you stick your toes in a ruin, as well as being able to fire out of it. So it's kind of hit and miss. That's not the right phrase. It's kind of swings and roundabouts with Towering, really. It is ultra tough. It's got a decent save, it's got lots of wounds, and you can see the stats on the screen there. Toughness 13 is pretty nice. I know it used to be 14, but 13 is still very good. 2+ armor, 22 wounds is all lovely stuff, but it just lacks a natural invulnerable save, which kind of annoys me a little bit. I think it deserves an invuln save. Even if it's something like a 5+, that wouldn't make it too overpowered, because it would only mean -4 AP weapons, or -3 with cover, I suppose, would actually affect it. I think the way GW initially created the points is done by stats, by, you know, toughness, save, wounds. I don't think they take into full consideration that a Monolith can be picked off quite easily, especially against certain factions like Tau, Astra Militarum, for example. Even Orcs, if you take a shooty Orc list, you can absolutely demolish a Monolith. You really can. There's lots of different synergies that you can do. Also, bear in mind that the Monolith only has 24 inches of range at best with all of its gear. And if you're talking about anti-tank weaponry, a lot of the anti-tanks in the game are quite long range. You know, 48-inch range, 36-inch range, sometimes 72-inch range. So we're kind of getting outgunned by better guns, which are much cheaper as well. So we have to literally go forward to be able to target those units, which is a bit of a shame. So that kind of leads me on to the next question, really, because if you're getting outgunned, you kind of need to move. You need to move forward, especially against those factions. So we've got an option. You either move naturally, which is quite difficult with the competitive terrain nowadays, or do you deep strike? Should you deep strike a Monolith? That's the question. Honest answer, I'm unsure. It's all game dependent, I think. In the Hypercrypt Legion, for example, you can just hyperphase it off, and it's less of a hit or miss scenario, because if you bring it on and it's in a bad location, you can take it off again, end of your opponent's turn. It's not that big of a deal, and you've also got Cosmic Precision to help you come back in when you need to. With other detachments, the deep strike is done, and it's a one and done kind of deal. Once it's in, it's not coming out again. So if there's no space to bring it in, you're kind of screwed. What you're going to do, how are you going to enter? You spent 400 points on this model, and if you can only get it in turn 3, and if you're lucky, you've already missed a couple of turns of potential damage output, or potential OC, or just potential scaring off your opponent from coming within 24 inches of it. So missing nearly half the game with it off the battlefield can be quite fatal. It's quite a bad move. So I don't know what to do with that. I mean, not only that, but the terrain is so cluttered, as I mentioned. Competitive terrain, there's so much of it. Finding a gap where you can stick a Monolith in is not easy nowadays. If you're playing your more friendly games, you can, take away a bit of terrain and make it a little bit less dense. But if you're going into GTs or just standard tournaments, it's going to be very clustered. And if you come up against a really good player that knows how to screen things like this out, then you're in real trouble there. Which is kind of more evidence to suggest that it's only playable in the Hypercrypt Legion, because at least you've got that 3-inch Cosmic Precision again. So should you deep strike? I'm on the fence. I'm not sure, because I can't see past the Hypercrypt Legion. If you're not playing the Hypercrypt Legion, then I'd say no. If you're playing the Hypercrypt Legion, you don't need to, because you can pull it off the board in turn 1. So that's sort of my answer with that. What about the Monolith versus the Tesseract Bolt? That's another one of our big units. When I was originally planning this, I did have the Obelisk in here, but it's just not worth talking about the Obelisk with these two units, because these two units are much more superior. So I've been the Obelisk side of it for now. Let's talk about the Bolt instead. It's the nearest competitive comparison that we've got. It also went up 25 points. It's now 425. I love the Volt, as you guys probably know. I started to really enjoy using the Volt. Flexible katana weapons that you can change up on the go. It's got a great stat line. And more importantly, it's got a 4+ invulnerable save, which the Monolith doesn't have. It's got 2 moons more, but it's only toughness 12, not toughness 13, so you've lost a bit of toughness. It balances out, so it's not a huge deal because you've got those extra wounds there. Is it better than the Monolith? Personally, I think the Tesseract Bolt is better than the Monolith, personally. But for Hypercrypt players that use the Monolith, I can see the asset of it. I can see why you would use it. I personally don't use it with the Hypercrypt Legion. I'd rather just not bother with it at all. But it's probably a good debate and deserves a full video rather than a quick couple of minutes. But yeah, I think the Tesseract Bolt is probably better in my opinion. Do we have any cool combos for the Monolith? I've got a couple for you. The first one is, you got Monolith, of course, obviously. You use your Eternity Gate to get some Immortals in with a Plasmancer. Now that Plasmancer in the Hypercrypt Legion can have the Horizon Tyrant enhancement for 25 points, so you get to reroll hit rolls of a 1 or all your hit rolls if you've entered the battlefield that turn, which you would have. If you've just popped in from the Eternity Gate, you're basically getting full rerolls if you've just been set up. Obviously, Immortals get to reroll wound rolls of a 1, potentially all wound rolls if your opponent's unit is on an objective, so potentially you're rerolling all your hit rolls and all your wound rolls with 5+ critical hit rolls with your Tesla or Gauss, whatever you chose. And also, Cosmic Precision Illuminazares is in the mix. Obviously, it's got to be close to these units within 3 inches, because now you're going to have -2 AP on those Gauss blasters, which I think is probably the better option if you're taking the Illuminazares. If you are taking the Tesla carbines, it's only -1 AP. Cover kind of nullifies it, so I would go with the Gauss blasters. In fact, 5+ critical hits give you lethal hits on a 5+, full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, -2 AP on the blasters. And then, of course, the Plasmancer, the Monolith, and the Illuminazares also get to shoot what they've got to offer as well. That's a nasty, deadly little combo that can literally take out an entire section of the battlefield, which is cool. Another cool combo is a little bit more defensive. You take a Reanimator with your Monolith and a Clumsy Spider. I mean, the Reanimator for obvious reasons with Reanimation Protocols, doubling up there, and the Spider gives you the Feel No Pain save of a 6+. For your Monolith, I mean, you could even add a Silent King in the mix here, because the Reanimator, the Spider will all interact. The Silent King will give rerolls of 1s to the Monolith maybe, so you could maybe make it a bit more offensive, but I'm trying to go down the defensive route here. And some people do like making tankier things even more harder to shift. Now, the Reanimator 75 points, the Spider is 75 points, so you're adding 150 points to make the Monolith more resilient. They're good little action monkeys as well for your secondaries, but 150 points to give a 400-point Monolith a bit more resiliency. That's quite a lot. I think I would rather invest in another unit at that point, but again, it's giving you options, and if you're Monolith heavy, then yeah, that's a way to tank up your Monolith. So that is the end of the video, guys. Make sure you are hitting on the next poll, which will be out at some point when you see this. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.